Oh, we are live. Well, hello, folks. How are we all doing?
Guys.
We're all having a bit of a laugh here because we're having a little bit of a problem with Peter's. Well, we're not having a problem with Peter's Wi-Fi. Peter's having a problem with Peter's Wi-Fi. But yeah. Anyway, everyone, welcome. Good to see you or not see you. You know what I mean. Thanks for coming. This is our Scotch Whisky Session 1. Very first session of the festival.
Come on.
We're very happy. We're elated and all that. And we've got some fabulous presenters for you and Colin Dunn. And it's going to be a great show. I'm sure Colin will forgive me that for now. So anyway, say hello, guys. I'm going to send most of you off. I'm going to start because of Peter's issues with his Wi-Fi. We'll start with Andrew and the Feta Cairn. Hopefully you've got your packs in front of you ready to go. And yeah, let's get going. So guys, I'm just going to knock you out one by one, if you don't mind. Jamie, I should have got rid of you first.
Eddie, how are you?
I'm doing well, Andrew. How are you, man?
I'm very well, very well. Love your setting. It looks fantastic.
Do you know what? It's great. And the smell is just, it's just that lovely, warm barley smell. You know, it's just, love it. Yeah. So where do we find you this fine evening?
So I'm in Edinburgh at the moment from my house, but we're about to take a virtual journey up the east coast into the Highlands of Scotland and visit Feta Cairn, of course.
Wonderful.
Yep.
Good stuff. Well, I'm just going to pour myself a wee dram if you don't mind.
Fantastic, of course. I'm jumping the queue a bit, as you said, Eddie. You know, Peter was going to start off in King's Barns on the East Nuke of Fife there, but we'll jump into the Highlands and hope we enjoy some Feta Cairn together.
Exactly, and I'm sure that Peter won't mind, and I'm sure you don't mind going first.
Not at all. No pressure, you know.
No pressure at all. So listen, I'll let you just have a little ramble about the whiskey and the distillery for a few minutes, and then we can have a wee tate when we get some questions coming through. But just to confirm, everyone, we're starting with the second whiskey, so that's the Feta Cairn 12-year-old, and this is Andrew Lenny from Feta Cairn.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's right. So, as I mentioned, we're taking a sort of virtual journey up to the east coast of the Highlands of Scotland, to a really beautiful part of the world. It's actually known as the Garden of Scotland because it's so rich with agriculture. And we're at Feta Cairn Distillery. The name Feta Cairn literally means the foot of the mountain. So that should give you an idea as to where our distillery is in relation to the Cairngorm mountain range that provide a beautiful backdrop to our Highland distillery. You'll notice on the bottles behind me as well, the unicorn. And the unicorn is really in reference to our founder, Sir Alexander Ramsay. And the Ramsays of Balmain founded Feta Cairn back in 1824. And their family's coat of arms contained the unicorn. And it's now become synonymous with Feta Cairn, and it proudly adorns each bottle of our whiskey. It's also the national animal of Scotland, which many people don't realise, but it's a wonderful tribute to our origins, as I say, founded in 1824. But predating 1824, this part of the world, just below the Cairngorms, was rife with illicit distillers. And there's loads of amazing stories of smugglers and farmers, you know, marching their cattle down this road that runs north of Feta Cairn's distillery up to the Cairn Mount. And this was an old drover's route. And as I say, it was used by illicit distillers and smugglers who would produce lovely Highland whiskey on a very small scale and march it down into the market towns and into the lowlands. Some amazing stories of, you know, smugglers using coffins, sort of fake pregnancy bellies, anything they could find to smuggle whiskey down into the lowlands. And of course, the Excise Act came along in 1823, meaning that distilleries could legally register at the sum of, I think, about £10 a year. So Feta Cairn was actually the second legally registered distillery in Scotland, shortly after Glenlivet. But today, there's not many distilleries in that area, and I think it'd be safe to say that Feta Cairn is probably one of the hidden gems of the Highlands. if you asked anyone in the world to sort of paint a distillery, a Highland distillery, you would probably paint something similar to how Fettercairn looks. Whitewashed walls, that lovely iconic pagoda roof, and it's just a beautiful little part of the world. But as I say, one that sort of most people maybe haven't visited, or they've maybe stumbled upon by accident. So we have an incredible amount of history, you know, almost 200 years of distilling at Fettercairn, yet a single malt that's not really as well known as it probably should be in its own right. These bottles that I have behind me were launched in 2018, and the start of a sort of celebration, a new chapter, if you will, of Fettercairn, and a beautiful, beautiful collection of whiskies. A really important thing that happened at Fettercairn was actually a distillation process that was invented by the distillery manager there at the time, who was called Alistair Menzies. And again, this is referenced on these beautiful bottles here, and something that the 12-year-old whiskey that we're going to taste together tonight really celebrates. So around the top of the spirit stills, Alistair Menzies fitted a copper cooling ring and drenched the outside of the stills with cold water, meaning that only the lighter vapours would rise for collection. So this was his way of sort of creating a lighter, purer, more refined style of spirit at Fettercairn. So the 12-year-old that we're going to drink today is a wonderful celebration of our distillery character. So loads and loads of fresh, vibrant, tropical fruits in our new make spirit. And what we've done is we've used lots of, predominantly we use ex-bourbon casks to add a lovely layer of vanilla, a little bit of soft spice as well, and really enhancing that tropical fruit note. So if we get our noses into the 12-year-old, hopefully that's what you find. Everyone will pick up different things. But what I think is great that this 12-year-old celebrates essentially a distillery with 200 years of history, but a legacy that's still to be written. And, you know, it's almost like having a brand new toy to play with. 12-year-old's, of course, unpeated, so it's a very light style of spirit. And as I say, that wonderful vibrancy coming from the copper cooling ring distillation process is wonderful. Matured fully in ex-bourbon casks, bit of vanilla, lovely bit of soft spice as well. When it comes to the palate, I think there's almost a sort of floral note in there as well. There's peaches, apples, and pears. And it's just a lovely introduction to the distillery character. And a great lineup of whiskies we have tonight. I think what I would say is that Fettercairn's probably a really great place to start with any tasting, certainly our 12-year-old. It's almost like an aperitif style of whiskey, beautiful for mixing in a highball with, you know, a little bit of soda or some ginger ale or something like that. But in terms of its flavour profile, very, very light, 40% ABV, so very much at drinking strength as well. And hopefully a great way to start your Friday evening or afternoon. Eddie, what do you think?
I would think so. Can you hear me?
I can, yeah.
Good stuff. I think it's a cracking breakfast whiskey.
Yeah.
I really do, which is a high compliment. I must admit that I haven't tried Fettercairn for a while. I think that there was a time when it possibly wasn't at its best, but I think you guys have done a stunning job of rejuvenating it, and it tastes really good. As you say, a lot of tropical fruit and a little bit of spice to it, but that lovely kind of sweetness and a little bit of citrus as well. It's just
that's right.
I've added a touch.
Have you added some water?
I've added a touch of water to mine. Yes.
Very nice, very nice. Well, you've just touched on a really important fact there, Eddie, and Fettercairn has provided an integral base for many successful blends that we celebrate today. And of course, White and Mackay took ownership back in 1973. So Fettercairn is a foundation of this sort of cult classic Scottish blend. But, as a single malt in its own right, it takes obviously lots and lots of time to plan sort of what the bottles should represent and what the flavour from the distillery should represent. So those previous bottles that you mentioned, they actually contained an element of peated barley. So there was, maybe 5% of the year they would produce peated malt. But when I talked about that distillation process, it's so unique and something I'd never seen in the industry. So the first time I walked into the still house at Fettercairn and saw this amazing copper still with this water falling down, the steam rising up, and this really light, vibrant style of spirit, it just made perfect sense that, that's the style of spirit that is celebrated in this new range. So, as I say, it's a new collection, and it's wonderful to actually, have 4 bottles behind me and be able to sort of share it with the world. It's a great place to be.
I can think of worse.
Yeah.
Although I have to say, I'm in a pretty good place right now.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I do miss visiting the distillery. I've only managed to visit once, and basically spent a bit of time around the outside of the distillery. I wasn't able to go into the actual still house, but even the dunnage warehousing we have, there's sort of 14 warehouses, about 30,000 casks, and they're all traditional dunnage warehouses. So there's just loads of little nooks and crannies at the distillery to visit, and loads of smells, sights, and sounds. And I think, of course, whiskey is about flavour, but it's also a lovely sense of people and place. And I think, Fettercairn's quite an unrivaled experience in that respect. There's loads to see, loads to smell and to experience.
Yeah. And can people visit Fettercairn, Andrew?
Generally, yes. Hopefully, next year we'll be able to welcome back visitors. But at the moment, it's we have to look after the staff who work incredibly hard producing the spirit, morning, noon, and night. So patiently waiting. But I guess that's one of the benefits of our industry. It's not made overnight, so we'll be here for the long haul.
Absolutely. I should have caveated that and said under normal circumstances. I didn't expect you to say, yeah, come on up.
I wish I could.
Yeah, I know. Well, listen, under normal circumstances, we'd all be together under one roof, presenting our whiskies to the lovely folks out there. But this is a decent second best, I think.
You've done a fantastic job, and we actually have an opportunity to communicate with people all over the world on this platform, which is absolutely incredible. So I guess one of the benefits, but of course, once we can get everyone back in one place, it's going to be a great thing to celebrate.
Yeah, it's going to be a big party, that's for sure.
Yeah. There's a lovely there's a lovely tasting note just to quickly mention before I finish and hand you over to the next distillery. But when I started with Fettercairn, there was it was kind of a moment where I referred back to my whiskey books to see what I could find about Fettercairn and see what was written. And I found a lovely little note in the back of one of Michael Jackson's books, Scotland and its Whiskies. And there's literally like 2 lines written about Fettercairn. But there's this lovely little mention of a rhubarb note that he picked up in the Fettercairn spirit. But he said, maybe it's time for another scone. But that rhubarb note was something that kind of stuck with me. And behind me, you'll see we've got whiskies from 12 years to 50 years. And that funky rhubarb flavour is something that just continues its way all the way through from the youngest spirit we have to the oldest. And just a lovely little kind of moment where the penny sort of dropped for me. And I thought, rhubarb, that's a lovely note to sort of bring everything together.
Absolutely. Never get enough rhubarb.
Thanks, Colin. Thanks, Stuart. Rhubarb's great. Yeah, it's an in-between between a sort of, I guess there's almost a vegetal note there, but it's very floral and very fruity as well. Yeah. Nice and fresh.
Absolutely. Great stuff. Okay, well, listen, Andrew, that was a really lovely start to the whole event, but to the tasting specifically. And I thoroughly enjoyed the Fettercairn 12. I'm sure I'll go back to it later when I can swallow rather than spit.
Yeah.
But less about that for now. So I'm gonna consign you to room 101 for the second, and we may bring you back a little bit later when if there's time. But thanks again, Andrew. That was great. Thank you.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks, everyone. Cheers, Eddie. Slàinte mhath.
Okay, so that was Andrew Lenny, brand ambassador for Fettercairn. Going to bring in who should have been up first, but unfortunately he was having some technological issues, which perhaps he'd like to share with us, as long as they're not really long-winded. But I'm going to bring Peter Holroyd in, who is the distillery manager at King's Barnes. Some of you may be familiar with him. He appeared on our new Scottish distilleries tasting, I think about a month ago now, maybe a little bit more. But anyway, I'm going to bring Peter in now, and we're going to then taste the King's Barnes Dream to Dram. Let's hope for a miracle here. Peter, can you hear me?
Hello, Eddie. Can you hear me as well?
Hooray! I can hear
Fantastic.
you.
Good stuff.
I can even see you out of the corner of my eye. I have to keep remembering to look at the camera, not at you.
Yeah, listen, apologies for the technical issue there. I'm not going to bore you with it, but we got there in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But, in these times, I think most people are a little bit more patient and maybe a little bit more understanding with one another. So I'm sure we can forgive you, but don't let it happen again.
Good stuff. And Andrew as well, that was fascinating. I love hearing about these kind of idiosyncratic distillery processes. So as soon as the distilleries open up, I'm definitely going up to Fettercairn to see that water around the
I know it does actually sound really fascinating.
Yeah.
But anyway, we're not here to talk about Fettercairn. We're here to talk about Kingsbarns.
Yes.
So would you? Shall I let you away and you can tell us a little bit about the distillery and about the bottling without my interference?
Of course. So we're a new distillery. We've only been running since 2014. Where are we based? Well, we're out in the east of Fife, so the East Neuk of Fife in Scotland. Typically lowland sort of character of spirit, but to go back a couple of steps, who are we? Why did we start a distillery? Where we started it and when we started it? Well, the original idea for a distillery on this location, and I'm actually in the tasting room upstairs, usually where we finish off tours. When we started off a distillery here, the idea originally actually came from a local golf caddy who spotted a gap in the market. There was no distilleries in this area for miles around that you could go and have a tour in. Back in 2008, 2009. You would have had to have gone to maybe Glenkinchie or Tullabarden is probably the closest ones, more than an hour away. So this is the home of golf. It's right beside St Andrews. So really wanted to start a distillery that was also a visitor experience as well. But obviously you need a lot of money and you need a lot of knowledge to be able to start a distillery. So that was where the Weems family came on board. And the Weems family, some of you might have already tried some of the Weems Malts range independent bottlers. So they're buying whiskey from all over Scotland and bottling it as single casks if the juice is up to the mark, or blending it and kind of making the whiskey more than the sum of its parts. So they really had a bit of knowledge and a bit of experience with Weems malts before coming on board with Kingsbarns, and really wanted to start a distillery that was something that was kind of for the family as well, for the Weems family. The next question is kind of when you start a distillery, what are you wanting to make? Well, you don't just cobble together all the pipework and see what comes out of the other side. Every aspect of the production process, which I'll go into a little bit, is geared towards hitting this light, fruity, floral style of spirit, something that's kind of typically lowland in style. So right from the raw ingredients, we're using locally grown barley, all unpeated. We're using mineral-rich water drawn from an aquifer directly below the distillery. And then we're maturing all the stock in Fife as well. So we want to give the spirit a sense of place, a sense of provenance or terroir. So all local ingredients. We then have, in the terms of the production process, we're making a very clear wort. And that's going to contribute to quite an ester-rich style of spirit. And from making that sugary liquid from the mash tun, we're then actually going to use 2 strains of yeast. And the best way I can describe as to why we're using these 2 strains is they both contribute something different to the character of the spirit. So you are what you eat. So if you give the yeasts a very clear colour of wort, it tends to produce this quite light ester-rich style of spirit. Whereas if you have a more cloudy colour of wort, which is the yeast is going to metabolise, it's going to eat and produce those flavours, it's going to give more of a kind of spicy, nutty character. So we're wanting a very clear wort to feed to the yeast, first off. 2 strains, one of them has been used for decades. It's called Anchor. It's got kind of a good flavour profile. It's got a nice rounded sort of character to it, but it's also very efficient in what it does. Now, the other yeast we use is a French yeast, and it's the one that gives us all our kind of top fruity notes in the spirit that you're gonna hopefully pick up in the Kingsbarns Dream to Dram. We have very slow distillation at the distillery as well. So once you get all that flavour into the fermentation, that's the distillation part. Is the next stage, obviously, where you're going to condense all that flavour that you've worked so hard to get into the washbacks through the mashing, through the fermentation, and the 2 strains of yeast. So slow distillation to be able to capture that and the right kind of segment of that as well. And then we take a very high cut point. Now from there, we're ending up with a very kind of fruit-rich style of new make spirit. I pick up quite a bit of kind of red fruit notes into it, all the orchard fruit notes that you're probably going to pick up in a lot of other new make spirits. But it's very kind of sweet, elegant. There's a bit of complexity in there. So once you've got your new make spirit, obviously you want to put it into the right casks. So we're for the Dream to Dram, which is the distillery flagship, and this is where you really want to try and let people know what's the distillery character. As a new distillery, you need to strive to make a DNA for your distillery, so that you've got something complex, unique, and you can let people know kind of what that is. So 90% of the maturation that goes into Dream to Dram is actually first fill bourbon casks, and they give a lovely caliber of maturation. You get the lovely kind of vanilla notes, maybe a little bit of custard, even white chocolate notes coming out of a bourbon maturation on Kingsbarns. But the other 10% of the maturation that goes in here is shaved, toasted, recharred casks from Portugal. And the whiskey that comes out of these barrels is a lot richer. It's a lot darker. It's red wine barriques that have been used for red wine in Portugal. Then the cooperage shave them and rechar the inside. And these casks have only ever had, as I say, 13% red wine in them. So when we put our new make into it, it's got a lot of alcohol extractives that come out of the oak. And the whiskey that you get out of there is pretty wild. It's really dark. It's almost more of a sherry maturation if you were to nose it. So the 10% going into of maturation of these STRs going into the Dream to Dram really give it a touch of richness. That's where you get this sour mid palate. So in the nose, if you've not already had a wee nose of it yet, it's quite sweet, quite elegant. Again, you're picking up orchard notes that you still pick up straight off the still. But I get a banana note off this, and it's actually banana foams. You know those banana foam sweets? Maybe a little bit of apricot as well. And in the palate, it's sweet up front. That's where you get that soft toffee up front. And then moving into the slightly sour mid palate, almost like summer berries, like red berries, and just a wee touch of oaky spice in the end as well. So a relatively short finish, but this is an ideal summer whiskey. This is something I would have maybe in the back garden on a summer's afternoon, or even before a meal. You know, an aperitif, ideal, absolutely ideal. So I hope you've all enjoyed your dram of Kingsbarns. A good way to start off after the Fetter Cairn, I think. Yeah.
I was just going to ask you, Peter. You said that you like to drink this in the summer and in the garden or whatever. I was going to say, do you not have to drink this all the time? Is that not part of your job?
It's one of the perks is sampling. Yeah, that's the thing you look forward to. Yeah.
I'm only pulling your leg. Don't worry. I know everyone drinks everyone else's. It's fine. It's a boring world. It's not. I was just going to say to you that I've tasted this on a number of occasions, as you know, and it along with a lot of the younger distilleries, and we've got a few of them on this weekend, including yourselves. Yeah. It never ceases to impress me how well they're coming along, but not just how well they're coming along, but how drinkable they are already. You know, I mean, this is this is 3.5 years old now, something like that, Peter?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this we're being very upfront and honest. This is very young whiskey. You know, it's 3.5 years old whiskey. But I think it's the quality of the new make going into the barrels and making sure that it's got some elegance before it goes into the casks, and then of course putting it into the right barrels, putting it into the right vessels. So you need to make sure that there's the balance of spirit character with oak, and making sure that that's kind of that comes together beautifully. Yeah. There's no point in making a decent new make spirit and then putting it into something that is going to be bludgeoned to death by cask.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Peter, have you been at the distillery from the beginning, or did you come in after it started production?
So yeah, I'm pretty much from the beginning. I joined in April 2014, so that was just before the stills came in, so everything was still going together. Gave me a chance to kind of get to know the plant and learn it all, because it was a hell of a learning curve, I'll be honest with you.
I can only imagine. But that's good. You've been there from the beginning, so you've seen the evolution of the spirit. And when you first started production, was it the idea of this kind of super fruity floral, the clear worts? Was that always the plan?
Yes, very much so. Yeah. So we actually brought on Jim Swan as a consultant, which of course you'll know of Jim. Unfortunately, he's passed away now, but he's worked with a lot of these younger distilleries as well. A lot of our contemporaries, Kilhoman, lots of us. And he really focused on producing something that is going to be, if a client asks for a whiskey that's going to be kind of quick maturing, then you're going to get a kind of lighter, fruitier style of new make to start off with. But you need to obviously make sure that it's got enough kind of weight to it that it can handle 10, 15, 25 years of maturation as well. Yeah. We're only filling 34 barrels a week. We're quite a small distillery. So that's the other thing. We're not making a lot.
Yeah. No, I'd rather you produce a little of something very good than a lot of something that's not as good. So you're doing right, Peter. Well done. Anyway, listen, Peter, that was fascinating. Thank you so much. We'll try and get you in at the end with everyone else, but we need to move on to the next whiskey. But thank you. That was great.
Yeah, my pleasure. I hope you enjoyed.
We did indeed. Thank you, Peter. Okay, ladies and gents, so we're now going to move on to my big friend, the big man, Paul Dempsey from Spey Distillery, who with his equally towering bottle of Spey Tratina cask strength. Where is he? Can I find? He's disappeared. He's gone. He's done one. No, he hasn't. There he is. Hey, Paul, how are you doing?
Good evening. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
What a great way to start the weekend, Eddie.
Absolutely. Did you prepare for tonight with a bit of Metallica or something? Or
there's been lots of noise going on all day, so great. It's great. There's a few students who are under quarantine in this block of flats here, so I've just been making sure they sleep. So
bloody students. I used to be one, to be fair. Anyway, it's great to see you as always, mate. And it's a lovely panel of presenters, to be honest, all really good guys. So I'm really grateful for that. But listen, I'm not going to use up any more of your time to talk about the delicious Spey Tratina cask strength.
Oh, cool. I'll introduce this one. Yeah, I mean, we are a distillery that not a lot of people maybe know too much about. We started producing in 1990, although it took the distillery, I think, 25 years to get built. Original owner was George Christie. We're based just south of Aviemore. So there's some pictures there. So it's a beautiful little site. George Christie was a well-known whiskey blender. He owned the North of Scotland Grain Distillery at the time. This was his weekend hideaway. It was never open to the public, but it's genuinely such a beautiful little spot. We're the closest distillery to the start of the River Spey, and I often like to bathe in the Spey, so that we feel that then sends the character further up the river for the other distilleries. If you show the inside of the still house, you'll see it's very small, but 500,000 litres a year. Only 2 stills. We were another, as Peter mentioned about Kingsbarns, we're another Jim Swan client. The current owners took over in 2012. Interesting sign this, actually. Anybody that's ever watched Monarch of the Glen, which was a BBC TV show filmed around the kind of early 2000s, this was the distillery they used, but they obviously changed the name for the TV show. So sometimes people think when they see the distillery that they get a deja vu. They think they've seen it before, and they probably have. It's been on TV. It's been used by Harley Davidson in commercials as well. But normally it was closed to visitors until very recently when we were able to start letting people in by appointment, current COVID situation permitting.
Paul, just to interrupt you very slightly, you just tell me when you want me to move on.
All right, yeah, just fire that on and we'll switch that and we'll get the still house up.
Okay.
Keep rattling through there. You'll see everything in our distillery is under one roof. Not very big stills, but although it's only 30 years old this year, everything's still done by hand. The distillery manager has tons of say in what we do. And we were another Jim Swan client. Our spirit we produce is very, very light, very sweet, very floral. Takes on the characteristics of the casks that we use really, really well. Again, Jim Swan's a master at kind of advising producers on casks to use. If you take that one down, Eddie, we can hit to the whiskey. But and that brings us to this one. Now, this whiskey we call Trutina. It's the Latin name for honesty, balance. And it's as simple as it gets. This is our very sweet, delicate spirit and bourbon casks, nothing else. You can see from the color, it's very, very pale. So largely refill bourbon casks. We didn't want to, again, Peter said something about, bombarding whiskey with kind of new wood, and we didn't want to do that. This is the calling card. This is the introduction whiskey for everything else that we are doing at the moment. And we do have some brilliant cask finishes, but this is the one we always show people first. We do a 46% version, but we have the cask strength here, which again, probably one of the most mild cask strength whiskies you could find. Really, really floral, lots of fruit, lots of vanilla, cream soda, and because it's cask strength, for those of you who've got the tasting pack, please don't be scared. I know it's not for taking your cat's temperature. But please have a little play around with the water in this, because the thing about cask strength whiskies, you can change the flavour to suit every individual palate, and you've even got your Larkfire water to go as well. But yeah, this is our breakfast whiskey, and it's very simple. It's very pure. It's a great introduction, a good whiskey to show people who maybe are still trying to find a whiskey they like. We launched the Trutina at 46% about 3 or 4 years ago, and then 2 years ago we did a cask strength version. We do the cask strength batches, 1,500 bottles at a time. And since we launched it, it's picked up a couple of major awards in the industry, which we're really, really glad of, because it drew attention to the distillery. Hopefully people like this. On the palate, it should still be very soft. Nobody really realizes, you might not realize you're drinking something that's about kind of 59% plus. But I think it shows that you don't have to, by going up in terms of alcohol, you can actually increase flavor. You don't have to just make it scary and send people screaming out the room. Very, very balanced. If we'd used, new wood on this, we might have overdone it. But it's not an old whiskey. But it's a great one. It's a great. Somebody said it earlier on as well. This is there's a lot of whiskies that you can drink in the afternoon on that one day of summer we get in Scotland each year. This is a good candidate for that. So
it's I must admit I haven't had this for a little while, Paul, because I haven't seen you for a little while. But it can really take the water. I think I've added at least as much water as there was whiskey in the glass, and it's holding its own very well.
Yeah, I mean, the original Trutina at 46 it's a stormer. I love that whiskey. But cask strength, you can, every single palate is different, and with cask strength, you can adjust it because your palate taste might change day to day as well. So,
yeah, I mean that's very important to note. About the addition of water. A lot of people say you should or you shouldn't. It's up to you. The way you drink your whiskey. If you want to add water to it, if you want to add Coke to it, it's your decision. The way to get the best out of it is to add, some decent spring water in varying amounts, and every whiskey will be so different in the amount of water it needs, as will your palate. So Paul's absolutely spot on.
But that's it. This one is.
I get chunky grapefruit. It's really kind of dark citrusy note.
There's definitely citrus on that.
Yeah.
I think the more water you add, the more kind of sherbet and cream soda starts to come out, but you get that sweetness.
Yes, sherbet. It's got that mouth-watering quality about it, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of zesty. So, but it's a great one. And again, I accidentally used this in a tasting in Germany when I should have been using the 46% one, and only a few people in the room actually noticed that we'd increased the cask strength. But then they got to experiment by finding their own spot. So yeah. But this was I think last year the cask strength category winner at Spirits Masters, which is a magazine run by a competition run by Spirits Business Magazine. It was fantastic. But we do the batches of 1,500 at a time, so you will see the batches coming out every year. We try and keep them as close as possible.
I was going to say, do you try and keep the same character from batch to batch?
Yeah, I mean, most of the spirit in this is, we will be doing multi-vintage, so between 6 and 8 years old is normal. But we try and keep the batches very close. We've only had 2 batches. Third batch will be out in the next, I think we're bottling it on the 27th of this month, actually. And we do we have a couple of cask strength in the range, but this is the one I always ask people to try first, because we also do one that's a cask finish and we do a peated one. But hopefully you get that sweetness and the delicacy in all 3 of them. But this is this is the simplest one. There's no fancy casks. There's no excessive age. It's just a great introduction to the distillery.
Well, here. It was very nice. Thanks, man. Paul, that was a nice kind of mid-term dram there. Thank you very much.
Coming up as well, actually. So
that was very nice indeed. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. If you don't mind, I'm going to move on to our next presenter. So I'm going to consign you to room 101.
Okay, I still have all the other whiskies to drink. So
exactly,
cheers, everybody. Thank you.
Slanjavar, mate. Slanjavar.
Cheers.
Okay. Well, I hope you're enjoying it so far. I am. You can see I'm spitting into my spittoon because unfortunately I can't stay at the distillery, although I might sneak myself under a cask or 2 or something. But anyway, we're going to move on to our next presenter, and we've got Jamie from the Glen Turret to talk about very exciting news at Glen Turret and the new whiskey. So let's get Jamie in. Jamie, how are you doing, man?
Absolutely fantastic, Eddie. How are you? Good to see you.
It's good to see you, man. I think I'm trying to think the last time I saw you as well. It seems like
I think it could have been last year at the London Whisky Weekender.
I think it could have been, which would be over 18 months ago, believe it or not.
There we go. I know. Well, it's good to see you, and thanks for inviting me on tonight. I'm enjoying it so far.
Oh, it's absolute pleasure, and I'm really excited to try the new Glenturret as well, because it looks pretty stunning, and I'm sure the liquid inside will be equally stunning. But I'll let you away, Jamie, and then we can have a little chat in a bit.
Sure, no problem. Thanks, Eddie. So hello, everyone. Good evening. I'm joining you live tonight from the Glenturret Distillery. As you can see behind me, I'm in the mill store at the moment. So we've got this beautiful other shoulder, Porteous Mill directly behind me, over 110 years old. And I thought that was quite an important place to be this evening. So warm welcome to you into Glenturret Distillery. So the Glenturret Distillery, for those of you who don't know, is Scotland's oldest working distillery since 1763. Now, the date 1763 is something that we've uncovered in our reawakening of the Glenturret recently. The date we used until recently was 1775, but under our new ownership, we were able to employ some professional historians and spend hundreds of hours looking through so much documentation to try and uncover more of our history. And in doing so, we managed to uncover a rental document pertaining to the then known Thurett distillery from 1763. And that document proves that the distillery was happening. It was here at that point, and for us, that's just absolutely fantastic. So that's the date that we will use going forward. And if you think about that, 1763. I mean, that's 18 years after the Battle of Culloden. So the Jacobite rebellion is still in the air, and we were here making whiskey. So it's wonderful to have such a rich, wonderful history and provenance behind you. And the Glenturret, for many years, has often been an unknown distillery. People are aware, but they don't know that much about it. So when I say we've relaunched recently as the Glenturret, it's more of a reawakening, really. And we've been very, very lucky to be able to work with Bob Dalgarno as our whiskey maker and bring to you a complete new range of whiskies, some of which you'll see behind me. So I've got the 12-year-old to talk about with you this evening. So we've introduced a brand new range. We've got a 10-year-old peat smoked, a triple wood, a 12-year-old, a 15-year-old, a 25-year-old, and a 30-year-old. So currently sitting in the distillery, and it's just such an amazing place to be. I mean, situated about a mile and a half outside the historical market town of Crieff, if you like, nestled in its own little microclimate, really, surrounded by the rolling hills of Perthshire. You can see the water of the Turret Burn running past the distillery. It's where we get our water from, of course, and that's only about 3 miles away from where I'm sitting now. So I really do call it the best office in the world, actually. And it's incredibly great to be sitting here talking to you from there this evening. So if I give you a little bit of context as to where we are now. So we were taken over in 2019 from the Edrington Group, and we were bought over by a joint venture by Mr. Silvio Denz and Mr. Hans Jörg Weiss. So private investor, and of course we're now under the umbrella part of the Lalique Group, if you like. So we've been able to really work hard on uncovering our history and bringing the focus back to the Glenturret as a distillery, and looking to see what our future looks like. And I have to admit to you just now that the future's looking great for Glenturret from my opinion. And it's a great position to be in from a brand ambassador perspective, having a whole new range of whiskies to play around with, if you like, and to showcase and be able to talk about. It's just a fantastic position to be in. So yeah, that's where we are just now. So we're really concentrating on the 3 touchstones, if you like, of what Glenturret is. And for us, that is the provenance, the prowess, the skills and mastery that's involved in everything that we do, and the passion, of course, and the passion for spirit, for whiskey, the passion for whiskey making, and the passion for bringing moments to you together. So really, really looking forward to that. So If I talk to you a little bit about our 12-year-old, as you can see, it's a brand new bottle design, completely designed from scratch by Lalique. It's glass striations on the side there, beautiful new brand colours as well, new labelling. Very heavy in hand as well, the bottle. So we're very, very proud of that. It's completely been built from scratch, and it's really quite a striking design from the bottle. Now, the whiskies have been put together by Bob Dalgarno, who, as I'm sure you're all familiar with, is up there as a world-renowned whiskey maker, and to have him working with us at the Glenturret in order to showcase what we have here and put together whiskies and create these whiskies for you is just absolutely fantastic to be able to work alongside him. The 12-year-old I'm going to talk to you about today is 46% ABV, natural colour, non-chill filtered. So we're very conscious about not keeping the maximum amount of flavour in there. And the 12-year-old Glenturret is what I would describe as the introduction of European oak and how that affects our spirit. And I say European oak, I'm not saying to you that European oak just from Spain. We're being very aware that we know by working with the bodegas and the cooperages we do, that they will be sourcing oak from outside of Spain. So that mid-central European oak that has a different character, brings in a different dimension, if you like, and some different flavours in there. For us, that's really great because, as a couple of the guys talked before, for us, it's about the spirit that we create and the hands that go through the process of making that. And for us, we didn't want that spirit to disappear. We wanted to retain as much of that distillery character as we could. So we're very careful in how we put the range together and how Bob created this. So 46%, for those of you who don't know, is marrying strength. And here at the Glenturret, we marry in inert or spent Glenturret casks, in opposed to stainless steel. We feel that by marrying in the casks from Glenturret, inert casks, it helps to bring a little bit more softness, a little bit rounder, perhaps a little bit sweeter in there. For us, that works really well. So if you have a look at the colour, for those of you who have it, natural colour, of course, it's a really deep sort of russet colour. And I'm reminded, actually, even on the drive on up the road today to the distillery, that the time of year we're in just now, you've got these beautiful sort of dark browns and oranges coming through off the leaves on the trees. And for me, that's a really great descriptor for the colour. Deep sort of russet colour is great for me. So again, if we go in from the nose on here, the first thing you'll take is that sort of fruitcake character coming through. However, we'd be quite careful here and quite intentional to say that it's not a heavy fruitcake aroma that's coming through. On first inspection, it opens up with ginger straight away, and there's that fruity character, but it's not, you're getting the apple and the sultana, but I'm really quite emphasising that we're not talking about a really rich fruitcake. I'm thinking more of a rounder fruitcake that you'd have in the afternoon for a cup of tea, for example, afternoon tea. A little bit more softer, not quite as intense. You get that little bit of spicy character coming, so from the European oak, of course, so you're picking up that cinnamon note in there, but there's a bit of sweetness there too. It's vanilla, and it's very well balanced. There's not one thing dominating over the other. It's really quite well balanced. The wood notes are coming, so you're picking out a little bit of the spice character in that wood driven, but it's not dominating. It's working really well with the spirit characteristic. And I said tea there, and for me, it's one thing that I get from the Glenturret New Make spirit is a real citrus note, and that might come over to you as different things. You might find it as apple or lemon or orange, and for me, it comes across in the 12-year-old as almost like a lemon tea. And picture that. So you're sitting in the afternoon, you've got a slice of fruit cake with the apples, the sultanas. It's maybe dressed with a bit of walnut, a bit of nutty texture in there, and what better way to have an afternoon tea than a really warm, beautiful cup of lemon tea to go with your slice of cake. And for me, there's a lot going on here, but it's very well balanced. Not one thing is overtaking from the other. It's texture-wise, on the palate, if we go in for a taste. So yeah, it's warming, and that spice is kind of drifting in and out. The sweetness is still there. Very, very, very real depth to it. It's quite complex. There's a lot going on, and the finish works really well. Really great balance between the casks that we've used and that Glenturret New Make spirit. So a great way to spend an afternoon, I hope you'll agree. Nice slice of cake and a cup of lemon tea. Cheers. So hopefully you've enjoyed the dram. I'm not sure if you'd tried it before, Eddie. Sorry, I missed that, Eddie.
Well, to be honest, I saved myself for today.
Good man, good man.
Obviously, we've had the bottles for a while, and we've been bottling it and whatever else, packing it away for the good folks at home. But I saved myself until today. I love it. I think it's tremendous.
You did indeed. Thank you very much.
What I'd like to ask is, Jamie, is that you've been working for Glenturret for a wee while, and you remember the old 12-year-old. How does this compare?
It's a very good question, Eddie. I wasn't around when the old 12-year-old was part of the range. Actually, that was slightly before my time.
Oh.
For me, it's looking at the Glenturret spirit in a new guise, if you like. So it's bringing out for Bob in a way. It was for him. It was almost going to meet old friends, working with European oak again. But we were very careful not to dominate that spirit, because the Glenturret New Make spirit is very soft. It's very delicate, and it has a real fruity, slight sweetness to it. So we were very careful not to overrun that, and we wanted to work with casks that would allow us to show that spirit on a journey, if you like, right through the range. So the 12-year-old, we feel, especially at the 46%, it fits really well into the range. But in terms of comparison to the previous one, I've never tried the previous 12-year-old.
Okay. Now, obviously, Bob Delgado is very closely associated with a certain distillery that begins with a capital M, and certainly tasting that 12-year-old Glenturret takes me back to tasting older versions, or the distillery with the letter M at the beginning of it, back in the sort of 90s and early noughties. There's definitely that lovely deep spicy sherry note, but not overpowering, just very well balanced. So I think a lot of people are going to be very, very happy about the way Glenturret has developed, because it definitely definitely hitting the spot, and I can't wait to taste some other expressions.
Yeah, thanks, Eddie. We're really proud of our history and heritage, and looking to the future, to the custodians, if you like, of the distillery just now, and Bob being one of them, along with Ian Rennick, our distillery manager, and then the rest of the production team, really looking at what Glenturret can be, and almost bringing us back into the out of the shadows, if you like, and saying, hey, this is what we do, and we're very proud of what the range of Bob has beautifully put together, and created and brought to the consumer, if you like. Yeah, really looking forward to being able to share more of the range with everybody. But 12-year-old, great afternoon dram for me. Really up there.
Brilliant. Well, listen, Jamie, that was very happy that you're here, and even happier that you brought such a tremendous whiskey to the table. However, time is moving on, so we need to, if you don't mind, we're going to move on to the next presenter. But
no problem. Cheers, guys.
Jamie, thank you, and Slanjavar, mate.
Slanjavar, mate. Cheers.
Okay, so that was Jamie Morrison and the Glenturret 12. I hope you enjoyed that. I've thoroughly enjoyed all the whiskies so far. The Glenturret was just the next in line of tremendous whiskies. Hope you're enjoying at home. Don't fall asleep. It's all good. We're getting to the final straight here, and who better to usher in the final straight than my old friend Mr. Colin Dunn. Let me just see if I can wind him up and let him go. Chiefy.
Hello there. How you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm great. It's just so nice listening to everybody on the panel here, showing the breadth of variety that's coming out of Scotland at the moment, with the different whiskies and the different styles. You know, obviously, working with Diageo, people tend to forget sometimes that we're actually a blending company that also produces single malts because of the growth.
Yes, indeed.
So getting right into it, because I know, as you say, as Booker T and the MGs once said, time is tight. So there's three things I wanted to mention really. And number one, if you want to know about the history of Mortlach, you can get it online. I'm not going to give that to you. I want to give you three things about Mortlach to kind of remember. Number one is I'm touching on marketing. So every distillery markets its whiskey and it's trying to find an audience and trying to expand that audience. And the interesting thing is with Mortlach has now got a whole new group of people who never knew the distillery existed. And that's because of the tie-up with HBO and Diageo with the Game of Thrones series. So I know there's people who say, oh, you know, it's just a gimmick. No, it's not. You've got to reach a new audience. And when this first came out, or when the set first came out, you know, as I said, I'm not, me personally, the packaging is great. I'm interested in on what's in the glass. And what happened when the Game of Thrones series came out, we discovered that 32 million people watch every episode of the Game of Thrones. 32 million people. So when a connection was made with the White Walker, because there were three blends before all the different houses came out, all of a sudden I had particularly younger people saying, you know, I've never drunk whiskey like this before. This is quite interesting. What's the name of the whiskey? And when the houses came out, all of a sudden people were saying Royal Lochnagar. Where is that? And oh, I like this taste. And we'd found a new audience. We'd found a new global audience. So Mortlach came in right at the death, the ninth one to end the series. So it's not about the Game of Thrones at this very moment. It's about what's delivering on the palate. And Mortlach has got a little bit of a checkered history. It's been in and out. I remember tasting a bottle that was done for Macy's in New York a few years ago. Then, of course, the Flora and Fauna range, for those of you who know that range. But Mortlach was always the best kept secret. And because it was used extensively in blends, we never really promoted it. We've only just got behind it in the last 3 or 4 years. And there's been a couple of false starts. But now we've got a whole range of Mortlach single malt Speyside whiskey that's connecting with people. And when we're tasting it, I don't know whether you've got 2 glasses. I normally do my tastings now. Forget the word bimber on this one. I like to have one neat and the other with water already added, so that you can compare and go back to it. Because once you've watered it down, you can't really go back. But just to be able to savor the difference. So, just on the nose, before I tell you fact number 2, just on the nose, it's almost like a polished leather note. It's quite meaty as well. But like with anything, and I'm sure your olfactory glands are working now. When I actually nose the watered down version, this is a lot more creamier. It's a bit like creme brulee, and there's some orange citrus notes coming through. And then when I go back, it's smelling quite heavy and rich on the nose. So the bottom line is that doesn't mean it's going to deliver on the palate. So I'd like you to take a mouthful of the Mortlach 15-year-old at 46%. And if you can, I'd love you to give it about, say, 7 or 8 seconds over the tongue, round the gums, chew it, move it from side to side. let it ping around the palate, dance on your tongue. And as I learned on the one of the sayings on the London Underground the other day, the three things: see it, sip it, sort it. So give it about 7 or 8 seconds in the mouth, allow it to really envelop your gums. And Mortlach has that soft, slumbering, dry, spicy finish. Here, they've used rich, sweet Oloroso casks and finished it in slightly less but more vanilla infused American oak. So it's not as big as the 12, 16 and 20-year-old that we released. In a way, it's almost like what we did with Kalila Mock a couple of years back. We want to bring people in slowly. So if people like this expression of Mortlach, they've got a little journey to go on with the other ones in the range. So while you're just enjoying that Mortlach, I just want to tell you that we make a pretty big deal out of it, that it's been distilled 2.81 times. I won't go into this now because of time, but I can tell you that you've got 3 wash stills and you've got 3 spirit stills. And what Alexander and George Cowie did when they came up with this idea of distillation, because everybody's doing it differently, everybody's got a recipe they want to work. So here, the Cowie family wanted to make 3 different kinds of new make. So the 3 wash stills speak to the 3 spirit stills. Wash still 1 speaks to spirit still 1. So there's a double distillation, which is pretty much normal for the industry. But the fun really begins with wash still 2 and wash still 3. A distillation occurs, but the low wines, we take 80% of the liquid from both wash stills and we put them into spirit still 2, which creates a second new make. So the 1-to-1 produces 1 style of new make, number 2 a second, and then finally the 20% from 2 and 3 wash go into spirit still number 3. It sounds a bit complicated, but what they wanted at Mortlach was to produce a whiskey that's going to give up 3 different new make styles. 1 to get the complex kind of flavors coming through, or congeners or compounds. 1 to get the the lighter, fruitier notes, and thirdly to get those heavier, sulfury notes that we call meaty. And if you go back and smell Mortlach, this 15-year-old, meaty is a really good word to describe it. So as I said, for me at the moment, I'm going through a phase where I'm using water to bring it down. This enhances the sweetness, takes away the burn. And for people who are getting into Mortlach, this is, for me, this is a surefire way of saying to people, look, we're all doing something different. We've all got distillation methods that are different. We've all got distillation times that are different. This is the beast of Dufton. This is a big, meaty dram from the heart of Speyside. And I'm just pleased that we're able to offer it to the public now in 4 different, well, actually, there's now 7 different expressions. If you look at some of the top end special releases, but now we've actually got a family of Mortlachs, which means that we can do, or I can do online, a tasting of 6 or 7 different Mortlachs, and they're all completely different. The bottom line, it's a big, meaty, coats the mouth almost like a liqueur, thick and rich and viscous. And with the right water, I mean, here for the first time I'm using Larkfire. My last point is the use of water and the use of dilution. And I've discovered that when I want a chilled whiskey, I'm chilling the glass in the freezer. So I'm pouring the whiskey into a chilled or frozen glass so that it chills the whiskey down, but it doesn't dilute the alcohol. I still get the alcohol. With water, You're going to get a slow distillation over a period of 3, 4, 5, 7 or 8 minutes. That's going to take it all the way down slowly. Again, perfectly viable. But for me personally, just by discovering that of late, by having a frosted glass, I can have a cold, refreshing whiskey without the alcohol being taken away. So to summarize, in this great world of whiskey that we're sharing, and with online festivals becoming much more popular, this is a great avenue for distilleries like the ones we have here on the show. We all need to reach out to our customers, and this is a surefire way for a brand, for a distillery, to use marketing to talk about their honest values that they hold at the distillery, and are able to produce a whiskey like, in this case, Mortlach, taking away. And I've never seen Game of Thrones, right? But I have seen the stills at Mortlach, and I have seen the way that it's made. And I love the fact that we've now got a plethora of expressions from this distillery. Somebody said to me the other day, "What's your favorite Mortlach expression?" And I said, "It's this one. That's my favorite Mortlach expression. Absolutely top drawer." So I hope that sums it up. You can get lots of information online about Mortlach, but for me, to summarize, neat or with a drop of water, either way, for new people experiencing single malt whiskey from this distillery, this is a great way in. And the Game of Thrones series has opened up the channels for a whole new group of people who are appreciating whiskey. See it, sip it, sorted.
Brilliant. Thank you, Colin. As entertaining as always. What was the middle bit again?
Sip it.
No, thank you for that, and thank you for providing the Mortlach. I must admit, I'm always fond of, very keen to try Mortlach in all its forms, but I think it definitely suits the that big bold sherry influence, and
yeah,
lovely to taste the Mortlach and the Glenturret side by side as well.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really good mixed bag you've got here. Not just the fact that you've got 6 individuals who love their liquid.
Yeah.
You've got 6 totally different flavor profiles. One's not better than, I sound like Prince Charles. One's not better than the other. They are all different, but they are all singing Scotch whiskey, which is fantastic.
Exactly. Well, that's what the Scotch Whisky Session is all about, my friend.
Yes.
Anyway, listen, thank you so much, Colin. It's lovely to have you on, and we will try and get you back on in a little while. But we have one more presenter to go. So I'm going to knock you off.
Okay.
Thank you, Colin Slanger. Okay, folks, so we are at the final dram, and I hope you've enjoyed the tasting so far. As I mentioned earlier on to Jamie, I'd saved myself for this. I hadn't tasted any of these whiskies in the lead up to the festival, so it's quite new to me as well. And I've been thoroughly delighted with all of the whiskies. I'm not just saying that because the presenters are there waiting for us. They are top drawer, and I hope you agree. Anyway, we're going to move on to our final whiskey and our final presenter. Poor Stuart has been sat through the whole thing waiting, so we shouldn't keep him waiting any longer, or you keep him waiting any longer. So let me just find Stuart. Stuart, are you still there? Are you still with us? Oh,
I'm indeed. How you doing?
There you go, Stuart. How are you doing? Thank you so much for waiting so patiently.
No, I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I've just been getting far too relaxed, listening to everyone and enjoying the drams, to be honest. It's been great listening to everybody talk about the distillery. It's been some really, really good drams tonight.
Yeah, yes. Does relaxed mean pissed? Just to be clear.
Let's be diplomatic about it, yeah. No, yeah, absolutely. I've been getting too relaxed and realising, oh yeah, I have to do my job tonight.
listen, you can let your hair down here, Stuart. We're all friends, as you know.
Thanks, Eddie.
I'm really looking forward to this Bravel. I know you selected it personally for the event, so thank you for that. But please, I'll give you the floor, and yeah, please, let's go.
No worries. So hi everyone. Yeah, Eddie, thank you very much for having us. Some really, really good whiskies tonight. So what I'm going to be talking about today is Bravel 18, but we'll talk about Douglas Lane, who we are, what we do, all particular as a kind of category, and get straight into some pretty tasty whiskey. So Douglas Lane, for those of you that don't know us, we were founded in 1948 by Fred Douglas Lane, and we're now in our third generation, still a family-run company. So Fred Douglas Lane's son, Fred Lane Jr., is now our owner, our chairman. His daughter, Cara Lane, is our director of whiskey, and her husband, Chris, is our CEO, so very much in the family. Cara and Chris themselves were actually inducted as Keepers of the Quaich. They were the first married couple to be inducted together, which is quite a nice story. We were founded in 1948. For that whole time, we have been independent bottlers and blenders, and now in November 2019, just gone, we became distillers for the first time in 71 years, now into our 72 years, taking over Strathern Distillery in Perthshire. So we are now independent distillers, bottlers, and blenders for the first time in our history, which is very exciting and a really good news story for us. We were in the site just about 3 weeks ago, which was really good. It was a good news story. And I'm not going to say the C word throughout this whole presentation, but during that time, it was good for us. But who we are and what we do, Douglas Lane, we very much believe in as natural as it gets. And what I mean by that is that everything that we do is natural colour. So there's no caramel colouring in anything we do. It's all the colour that we get is straight from the cask, non-chill filtered. So again, what I mean by that is that we don't chill filter the process. We allow all the fatty acids, the proteins and the esters to come through into that final liquid, giving what I believe definitely more texture. And I also believe a bit more flavour in that process. And then we do everything at high or natural cask strength. So I believe Paul the Spey was at natural cask strength. What we're tasting tonight, the Bravel, is about 48.4 high strength. So not straight from the cask. It's been monitored down to a certain percentage, what we're tasting today. So Bravel itself is a distillery that, let alone commercial bottlings, but even independent bottlers, actually, you struggle to find it as a liquid. So a great one to always start, and one of the reasons I chose it is it's a fairly unique one to actually get your hands on, which I always enjoy. But the All Particular range is part of our exceptional single cask range, where we include provenance, a slightly lower price, more affordable luxury, an entry point, a premium barrel, where Fred puts on these crazy alliterated tasting notes. I have one just up here, actually. But then the All Particular, and then we go on to our extra All Particular, which is, we've just released a Port Ellen 40-year-old, which was really love to get my hands on. I don't think I'm going to get the opportunity. But the Bravel is our 18-year-old. It's a sherry Oloroso, but 292 bottles and 18 years old. What we'll do is we'll jump straight into tasting, and then I'll talk about what single cask is as a kind of entity. As I said, if you look in your glass, it's natural colour. So that colour that you see, you can actually, the one thing I've loved about being able to, I locked myself in the sample room during the festival weekend there, which was a horrible experience. But the one thing I do love about looking at single cask and looking at non-chill filtration and no caramel colouring is that you can actually have a guess and test yourself on the whiskey and what it is without looking at the label. So a lighter colour, let's say, for an 18-year-old sherry butt that we maybe expect. And on the nose has, and the one thing is I've actually had this open for a while. So it's, when I initially nosed it straight out of the sample, I've got a whole bottle to myself as well, so I have taken it from the sample. It has opened up quite significantly as well. Orange, slight ginger. There's a real softness to it. It's not too sharp, which you would maybe expect from a 48.4. Slange, palate. And on the palate again, for me, that ginger and slight spice actually comes through into it, more cinnamon and maybe nutmeg. But then there's a soft milk chocolate. There's a kind of maybe a chewed leather through it as well, which is quite interesting. I always encourage, you can read off the tasting notes in the bottle. Fantastic, great. But the thing is, I always find that when people do that, they either forget them or they just take it and they get very influenced. So I always like to encourage people to do their own tasting notes and develop their own relationship with that liquid. And I think that's a very good exercise for anyone that's going into whiskey. And Brave Isle itself is a distillery. As I said, it's very uncommon to get it, but the liquid, the new make spirit that it produces, get these really thin necks, the stills, and then these kind of sloping line arms. So you end up with a very fruity and floral based spirit. So introducing that to, say, a sherry butt that we've done here, you really get that impact of the sherry cask. You get those spicier notes, those milk chocolates, as I said. So much more intense. And then Paul had mentioned as well, looking at high strength, cask strength alcohol, someone had said to me in a tasting just last week that, I don't really like watering down my whiskey because I like it at that strength. And it's like, that's absolutely fine. I always find, and Paul said it absolutely perfectly, when you have it high or cask strength, you're able to control it and have your own introduction to it, and monitoring it down. And I always say, you can't take water away, but you can always add it. So just little by little, if you find that it's maybe a bit too intense with alcohol, just little by little, introduce yourself to it, and you can control it in the bottle. And I think Colin had mentioned, as soon as you add water to whiskey, these congeners, these flavors all pop off, and you actually introduce a kind of exothermic reaction where the humidity intensifies, the flavors pop off, and it's a real experience in the glass as opposed to losing that earlier in the process. But single cask as an entity, we talk about the 5 categories of whiskey: single malt, single grain, blended malt, where we have our remarkable regional malts, for example, say blended Scotch, that big fat baby I always call it, the Scotch industry, that says 85-90% plus market share. But single cask's a really unique one. Every distillery we talk about having its own bloodline. That new make spirit's consistent. Mortlach will produce its own new make spirit, as Colin was talking about, and we'll go into different casks, and those casks are different characters of that family, which I always find really interesting. You've got brothers, sisters, cousins, uncles, aunties, and you might hate them, you might love them. They might like certain types of music, they might be tall, short, whatever. And that's what casks are. That new make spirit from one distillery can go into 1,000 different casks and give you 1,000 different characters of that family. And that's been a massive thing about being at Douglas Lane, is that these monthly samples that we get, terrible job, but these monthly samples that we get, you've got a Glengoyne, which is a big favourite of mine, and then all of a sudden you've got a bourbon cask, and then a hogshead version, a sherry version, and you get to see these different sides of the same family. It's quite exciting. I really do enjoy that. But Brave Isle itself is, again, not a common one that you find. And I'm a big fan of it. But the learning curve being at Douglas Lane has been massive with regards to the access that we have to all these different distilleries, these different casks, and just seeing these different faces of all these families, these commercial bottlings that you do know.
Well, Stuart, that's a real stunner to finish the tasting on. I think everyone will agree. I mean, I quite often say that none of the whiskies have let us down, but I can quite hand on heart say that all of these whiskies have been
great,
fantastic. But that Brave Isle, I mean, I love Brave Isle, and I love those distilleries that just quietly go about doing their work. The real sort of workhorses that actually produce incredible whiskies. Like Imperial and Glenbergie, and the real fruit bombs. And I would definitely encourage people to try whiskies from those distilleries that are perhaps a little bit more unfashionable. And I think that your good selves at Douglas Lang and other independent bottlers, you do a great job of highlighting, championing these distilleries that perhaps otherwise would never get seen as a single malt whiskey. And we should not forget, I suppose that's where really the single malt market started, really was with independent bottlers, and that kind of sticking the neck on the line when blended whiskey had such a huge domination, as it still does. But nowadays people generally accept that single malt is a very interesting area. So thank you. That's what I can say.
No problem.
Have you tried many Brave Isles yourself before this, Stuart?
One or two within obviously the old particular range, but I know I think they've called it now Braes of Glenlivet, but the Chivas Brothers released I'm trying to remember the umbrella title for it. The Lost Distillery is not the Lost Distilleries, but they released Caperdonic. I've got Caperdonic 18, which is stunning. But they released it under Braes of Glenlivet. I tried that commercial bottling of it. Other than that, I've tried a couple of old particulars, and it's it is great having access to these distilleries. I had a sherry Milton Duff just the other day, and again, that's one of those ones that you're talking about. It's not shouted about a lot, but great spirit, great liquid.
Exactly. And I think that's the great thing about whiskey is you can there's so many of them out there that you always uncover a new favorite. And I'm sure there's many people who are watching this with the tasting packs who've never tasted Bravel before. I think even some of our presenters have not perhaps tasted Bravel, and they're raving about it. So I think you've done the distillery and yourself no disservice, Stuart. Thank you.
Thanks very much. It was a pleasure.
Good. Okay. Well, we're kind of reaching towards the end of this tasting session. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring everyone back in just for a last natter. But thanks once again, Stuart. That was tremendous, and thank you for sharing the Bravel with us. I think you've changed some people's lives for the better.
Good.
So I'll bring the guys back in now.
Hey everyone.
Hello.
Hi guys. So Jamie, I'm sorry, I didn't realise that you weren't tasting along. I think everyone else has been tasting along.
That's all right. I'll have a wee taste along when I get home. Some fantastic drams to have a try of, most of which I've never tried before. So that's going to be a fun Friday.
I think so. I mean, it's definitely been an eye opener for me. Tasting through these whiskies, all of them excellent in their own right. So thank you guys for choosing such amazing whiskies. Just wanted to ask all of you a quick question because we don't have a lot of time. But all of you, if you add all of our experience together in the whiskey industry, there's a few 100 years, I would think, even just with Colin actually. So I was just going to ask one by one. Are there any developments in Scotch whiskey or just whiskey as a whole that really kind of excite you or that you see coming down the road, which you think we should all take note of? And I'll start with Stuart because you're at the top of my screen.
Yeah, I mean, the first one that kind of came to mind there was kind of sustainability. You look at Johnny Walker, I think Diageo combined with another company to create another company, Bullpex Limited or something, to then develop sustainable packaging, which you can kind of see going forwards. Pernod Ricard Absolute have been trialing it as well, and I know Runar, going to just the drinks industry as a whole, starting developing potential gift packaging, and I'm hoping to see a lot more of that trend passing through into the industry because I think it's very important. We produce such a convivial and together spirit, and I think that should be a global thing as well. But I think that's a very good direction that we're taking it in. But I'm seeing a huge amount of that in the industry, and I'd like to see that continue, and I think it will continue with the investments that we're seeing from some of the big players in the industry. Let's see.
Mm-hmm. And Andrew, what about yourself?
I think for me, what I like at the moment is this sort of movement in the direction of accessibility, because I learned to drink. I didn't learn to drink whiskey, but my uncle basically introduced me to whiskey drinking through a mix of whiskey and ginger ale. Because neat whiskey for me just didn't work when I was a little bit younger, and it introduced me to essentially like a world of flavour. I never knew I was going to be a brand ambassador or work so tightly with whiskey, but it was his way of opening the door for me into enjoying this incredible world of flavour and this incredible history. And we've sampled a little nugget of it tonight with all these wonderful distilleries, but I think there's a long way to go for single malt distilleries and companies to sort of work on bringing people in and being an accessible sort of collective and a place where people feel like they're welcomed and they can enjoy the wonderful world of whiskey, because it's maybe up until this point it's been quite a confusing or a scary place to be. But I think there's lots of positive movements in terms of being accessible and introducing new people from all backgrounds into the world of whiskey.
Yeah. Indeed.
Well said.
Colin?
Well, Stuart touched on my main one, which is the sustainability angle, particularly when you're with a company like Diageo, you've got to try, where possible, to be a leader in the field. And this is a major topic globally that we all have to look at. The second point, I'm seeing more and more people are getting into whiskey through highballs. That seems to be a massive way forward at the moment. Originated originally over in Japan, brought over here, and the third one that's taken on board is cocktails. I mean, Andrew, sorry, that way? Was it that way? That way. Andrew Lenny, I remember meeting him when we did a Talisker cocktail competition, and it was served up in 6, 7, or 8 different ways by 7 or 8 different young individuals who were into taste and flavor, and then being able to produce something that was accepted by the customer or the consumers. And to see Andrew now in the industry, that's exactly what it's all about. We're progressing. It's not, we all know where it was 30 or 40 years ago, 20 years ago. We're moving ahead, and we're finding different ways to drink whiskey, and that's making it appealing from people from 18 years of age all the way up to my age. Although I am a no age statement, I hasten to add. I am still filtered though. There you go. But yeah, sustainability, cocktails, and highballs. That's the big change that's happening or about to happen in the years ahead.
Okay, thank you, Colin. And Paul?
I think one of the things I've really enjoyed in the last couple of years, and I hope we see more of it, is it's never been easier for people around the world to connect with the distilleries, and we're getting feedback now. I think maybe 20 years ago, customers never saw a whiskey until it was on the shelf. Now we're bringing people in. We're using events like this where they can talk to us. They're writing tasting notes. They're sitting on panels. And I really hope more and more of that continues. A lot of the new distilleries have welcomed visitors in straight from the start. So there's more and more people learning. And that can only help us. I mean, the whiskey industry 20 years ago was probably more of a kind of closed shop. You never knew what went on. And I love the fact that people can actually check in with you and, contact you and get answers to their questions and give us some ideas that we can steal for the future. So.
Yeah, exactly. Jamie?
I think to echo what Paul said there, that for me, what I'm really enjoying over the past few years is the thirst for knowledge of people has increased somewhat. And people are asking more and more in-depth technical questions. They want to know more and more about the liquid, the story behind the brand. And for guys like us, it's great because it makes for so much more interesting conversation, and it can go so many different ways. And my second point quickly would be that, again, echoing what some of the other guys have said, that this digital revolution that we're kind of going through at the moment, and a lot of that's been forced upon us through the current situation, but I think it's something that we should continue driving, because as the guys have said, we're reaching a wider audience quicker, and we're being able to fulfill more information out there and bring people closer in. So that's fantastic for me, and long may it continue. Even when physical events come back, I don't think we should lose the enthusiasm for the virtual, because there's a lot of times when certainly some friends of mine wouldn't feel comfortable going to a whiskey event in physical presence. They might feel a little bit intimidated or something, but being able to take part in a panel discussion like this, or a virtual event from the comfort of their own living room, it opens up that conversation a lot more. So for me, it's about the thirst for knowledge and the access to virtual and that driving force.
Indeed. Thanks for that, Jamie. Peter, lastly but not leastly.
Yeah, again, echoing what a couple of the guys have said, Stuart and Colin, sustainability is a big thing. Having green credentials. There's no two ways about it. We're an incredibly energy-hungry industry. So even from a business point of view, if you can save some money by recovering heat, putting in a heat recovery system, then it saves money for the company, as well as reducing your carbon emissions. Mm-hmm. I think visitor experience is a great thing as well, as Paul touched on. I think we need to make sure that after all of this is over, hopefully, we can let people come back into the distillery, and to all of your distilleries as well. This is a visceral experience. People want to go to a distillery and smell it all, smell the malt, and smell you see it all happening. So I think it's very important not to forget that, to bring people on the journey of the brand, of the whiskey, of all of our distilleries, to bring people with us. And last and not least, I'm a proper geek when it comes to the production process. So my crystal ball says that yeast is going to be the next big thing. I've done casks for years and years and years, and finishing casks, and trying different wines and rums and aging whiskey and all sorts of different sort of oak casks that have held different things in them before. But I think yeast is the new frontier, and you're seeing a lot of interesting distilleries doing different things with yeast, trying different strains. There's thousands and thousands of different strains of yeast, and they all produce different characters. So that's my crystal ball, as people are going to be experimenting with different strains of yeast to make novel flavors, novel aromas, because at the end of the day, that's what's important. It's what's in the glass, making something complex and unique. So that's what I think.
Great. Well, listen, guys, thank you so much for your time and for selecting these incredible whiskies. Really interesting responses to that question as well. I think all of you have very good points to make. I think the main thing is that we're in a really good time for whiskey, not just from Scotland, but from all over the world, and even here in Englandshire, Yorkshire. So yeah, it's great to be into whiskey at the moment. It's time we finish this, so I would love to say once more thank you so much to our lovely presenters, each and every one of you. Thank you for making the effort to be here, and for the lovely whiskies. Thanks to all of the viewers who tuned in. I hope you enjoyed it. For those of you watching back, I hope you enjoyed it too, maybe at a later date. But that's it from us at Scotch Whisky 1. I will see you in just under half an hour for the next session, which is the Asian tasting. So, guys, thank you once more, and see you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.
Thanks,
Cheers.
guys. Cheers.
Pleasure.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.